Well, joining me now is Steve Headley. He's former RMT Senior Assistant General Secretary. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, David. Thank you for the invite.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. I mean, just in terms of the RMT, I think people were on the side of the RMT. This latest strike action, I think, is callous. I think it's vindictive. It's clearly been chosen to cause maximum disruption. I'm not sure the public will like it.
Well, first of all, David, can I just make it clear that I'm not on here representing the RMT.
Sure.
I'm on here as a pundit. But what I would say is the RMT have taken advice from their members, and the members and the executive committee will have put on that action. And why I think they put on that action is that not because they want to go on strike, but because they want to bring the government, and it is the government. And by the way, the RMT on this occasion are not a public sector union. The companies that they're negotiating with are not in the public sector, they're in the private sector. And those companies themselves actually want the government to unshackle them and let them get to the negotiating table. So that's why they've picked these days. They are using them for maximum leverage. And the maximum leverage that they're hoping to obtain from this is to get the government to the negotiating table.
So when you look back at what the RMT has actually been offered, my understanding is they were offered 5% for last year, this year 4%, so a total of 9%, inflation running at 10.1% is thought to drop further. That offer isn't bad, is it?
Well, let me first of all talk about inflation, David, because inflation, if you can imagine it, I'm not being patronising, is like blowing up a balloon. The rate of inflation is the rate that you blow up the balloon, okay? When inflation comes down, it just means the rate of prices rise at a slightly lower rate. So it's come down from 10.5% to 10.1%, but prices are still going up by 10.1%. So in effect, what that means is that if you have a 4% pay rise this year now, it'll mean over a 6% real terms pay cut because prices are continuing to go up.
But when inflation does come down, it means that the prices remain static. So therefore, you will have caught up by having.
That's not true.
But you will have caught up by having 9%. If you work in,
that's not true, David. You've got a misconception of what inflation is. Inflation.
Do you think it's realistic?
No. Well, this is an important point.
Carry on.
Inflation is the rate at which prices increase. So if inflation is 10.5%, it means they're going up 10.5% a month.
So when inflation falls to 2%, then what happens?
No, it's still going up by 2% a month. The 10%.
But the gap has been narrowed by the amount that you have been given.
It hasn't been narrowed because what's happened is that 10% is still there.
So what do you think the RMT should be asking?
If it's deflation, that means it's coming down.
So what level do you think that it is acceptable for the RMT to accept?
Well, I personally think, and again, I'm not here representing the RMT, I think every worker in this country, including the RMT, should be getting a pay rise that's in line with inflation. And that can be paid for out of the £42 billion in avoided and evaded tax every year. I mean, that's a government.
So you're saying they should accept 10.1%?
I think that they should. That's up to the RMT members. This is my personal point of view. I think that they should be given a rise in line with inflation.
So 10.1%?
This is my personal point, whatever inflation is.
So the question I have for you is, all of these unions, you know, you've got nurses asking for 19%. In fact, Pat Cullen actually said to her members that that was unachievable, and she said that the offer on the table should be accepted. That was thrown back at her. You've got the junior doctors asking for 35%. Who's paying for all this? Well,
the reality is that we are paying for it as taxpayers. We're all paying for it as taxpayers. But what happens when this money goes in the pockets of nurses or junior doctors? It's not stashed in the Cayman Islands, where the $42 billion of unclaimed taxes is currently being stashed. It goes back into the local economy. People spend it in the shops. People help avoid a recession that this country could very, very easily go into. So that money gets recycled back into the economy and put to productive use.
So how do you square this with people who are struggling, who have a job they're just about managing, keeping their head above water? They then have to pay more money in tax to pay for these pay rises when they themselves are not getting it. That's not fair.
Right. Well, first of all, what I would say is that I want, and I made it very clear, I've said it already, I want every worker in this country to have an inflation pay rise.
But they won't get it.
Can I? Well, they may get it if they join a union and fight for it. But can I make a point about the railway in particular? And that is that they've got they've got billions of pounds every year getting paid out to shareholders. And that's because of the nature of the train operating companies and the rolling stock companies. All that money is getting paid in already by the taxpayer, a lot of it. And it's just being paid into the pockets and the bank accounts of shareholders. Now, if that system was stopped and that money was used to actually invest in the railway and give people decent pay rises, it wouldn't cost the taxpayer a penny in that instance.
So taking your point, isn't your beef with these private rail companies, why are you using the general public as collateral?
Well, once again, I'm not here representing the RM.
Why are they using the general public as collateral?
Well, they're not using any general public as collateral. What they're trying to do is use the fact that there are certain dates which will bring the government to the table. They will provide leverage to bring the government to the table. And, you know, we can have this. We can have all these distractions about they pick that date and that date. It's not solving the problem, David. And what they need to do, the government need to get around the table and solve a problem with the nurses, with the railway workers, with public sector workers and with private sector workers.